This program contains graphic violence and sexual situations. Viewer discretion is advised. Saw. Two men find themselves at the mercy of a sadistic serial killer.
He's masterminded a game. He wants his victims to choose between death or life with a gruesome disfiguration.
He's torturing them. He's testing them.
If you follow his instructions carefully, you may make it out alive.
Saw may just be a movie, but in real life, a quiet pizza delivery man would find himself in a similar deadly scenario.
It was all a game, but it was a game that ended in death. It was a true life Saw.
Like Saw, this gruesome murder has a third act that will make your jaw drop.
There's a huge twist that no one saw coming.
The case is such an amazingly twisted, mixed up, sad plan that went wrong.
When Lionsgate released the movie Saw, the film kicked off the most successful horror franchise in history. The 7 Saw films grossed $874 million at the box office worldwide.
Saw was a very unique concept to use in a horror movie because it's kind of a vicious game, but it's also like, where is your moral compass?
The movie's antagonist is a character by the name of Jigsaw, who lures two strangers into a dingy bathroom and makes them play a game that will determine whether they live or die.
Well, I think the brilliant thing about Saw is that anybody sitting in the audience could relate to whatever happened 2 minutes before you ended up in that room. And you're thinking, okay, what sick, twisted nightmare am I having?
In Erie, Pennsylvania, a middle-aged man named Brian Wells finds himself trapped in a jigsaw-like plot. He too must follow a list of instructions to make it out of a horrible situation alive. August 28th, 2003.
And that is 20.
An oddly dressed Brian Wells walks into a bank holding a cane.
Next customer, please.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm fantastic.
He's really calm. I mean, he's just standing there in line, like, just waiting for, like any other customer.
It was an afternoon, so I imagine it was probably pretty busy.
A few customers notice Brian's odd appearance.
He was carrying a cane and wearing some sort of contraption that onlookers thought at the moment to be some sort of harness for a medical issue with his neck.
And one of the customers could actually hear like a ticking sound, but didn't really think anything of it.
Next customer in line, please. What can I do for you, sir?
She takes the note and she opens it up and she reads it. And it says, gather all the employees, get the access codes. I need $250,000.
I don't have much time.
He literally pulls up his shirt to reveal this thing that's underneath his shirt, and it's a big box. And that's when she realizes, oh my God, he's got a bomb. And the first thing she does is she actually goes to her manager, who's standing nearby.
Oh my God, look, we're being robbed. What?
And so the manager just takes the note and looks at it and realizes quickly that you need 2 managers to open up the vault. And there's only 1 manager there that day.
Just stay calm. I'm the only manager on. I can't open the vault.
Unable to open the vault, the bank manager is desperate to get the robber out of her bank.
Just give him what we have behind the counter. Okay. Everything will be okay.
Okay.
So the teller goes back and she just grabs a bag and she fills it up with as much money as she can. Turns out there's only about $8,000.
As the man walks out of the building with the bag of cash, an alert customer realizes that the bank is being robbed and jumps into action.
He dials the phone right away, 911, and he literally follows the suspect right out the door.
When the bank robber gets in the car, the witness actually sees the robber read what seem to be a few pages of notes, clues, like those from the film Saw.
When he left, he drove a little ways from the bank to McDonald's, which isn't that far away, just across the parking lot.
At this point, every cop in the metro area is racing to the scene. The first Pennsylvania State Trooper to arrive at the bank, he looks over and he sees the car.
What's so interesting is the police expect that person to be way out of town, find him about 100 feet away from the bank over at McDonald's.
You, in the car!
The first trooper pulls behind the bank robber. Then a second trooper blocks him from the front.
Open the door from the outside. Take 2 steps forward. Down on your knees. Place your hands behind your head.
I got a bomb on me, sir.
Do not move.
I'm not moving. Be careful, sir. I've got a bomb on me.
So the troopers back off from the suspect. He's got his hands cuffed behind his back. He's kneeling down next to his car.
Code 9, suspect says he has a bomb. Code 9, send backup. Backup, please.
They call headquarters. They ask for the bomb squad. They remove themselves and all people and form a wide perimeter around the individual. First and foremost, nobody wants to lose their life. And they wait. And they wait for that bomb squad to get there.
Can I get an ETA on the bomb squad?
At this point, at least one of the television stations here in Erie began to broadcast the scene live.
He's got a bomb on his chest. Anything blows up, take this whole block out.
As the bomb squad races to the scene, the bank robber begins pleading with police to help him.
Why is nobody trying to come get this off me?
The FBI shows up because they're responsible for the bank robbery. They pull up and they're watching this whole scene too. Most bank robberies don't end up with a guy kneeling down in the middle of the street with a bomb wrapped around his neck.
Agents and the police are able to quickly identify the bank robber as Brian Wells.
The bank robber was driving his own personal vehicle. They ran the license plate number and tracked it down to being registered to a Brian Douglas Wells.
Cops have got him on the wraps.
How close can you zoom in? How close can you zoom in with that? We're live. Well, we need you to zoom. We are zooming.
They pull up the picture, and they could clearly see that Brian Wells' driver's license is the guy kneeling down with the bomb around his neck.
Brian Wells is a local pizza delivery man with a clean record. He tells the police a bizarre story about how he ended up robbing the bank.
There were 3 men by the towers. I delivered them a pizza. They held a gun. They were gonna shoot me. And they said they needed to put this on me. It's gonna blow up.
He starts yelling to the police. I went up to the towers. 3 men grabbed me. They shot at me. And they put this bomb around my neck. And they forced me to go rob the bank.
I'm not lying.
Brian also says he was given a list of instructions to follow in order to get the key.
I think that the similarity between Brian Wells and the Saw movie is fairly close. There's a certain amount of time that he has to get back with his money or else his device will go off.
The tension must have been so thick, just waiting for this bomb to go off, if it was going to go off.
Suddenly, The bomb starts making an odd sound.
It's ticking! Why are you holding guns on me? You need to get your bomb squad here. It's ticking!
And then all of a sudden you can hear this beeping. This beep, 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 and it starts getting faster and faster.
Why is no one coming?
He's trying to get off the ground because he knows something is going on. And then all of a sudden, it explodes.
The man was sitting there as he was since about 3 o'clock when all of a sudden a loud explosion and he flipped onto his back and the state police troopers scrambled. They're still holding guns on him, as you can see. They're still not exactly sure his condition. It is apparent that he did have a bomb and he detonated it in front of the state troopers and the FBI agents that have been here.
When the bomb did explode, it exploded into his chest and killed him instantly.
In the blink of an eye, this turns from a bank robbery to a death investigation. But the problem is, they don't know if it was murder or suicide.
Sadly, 3 minutes after Brian Wells was killed, the bomb squad finally arrives.
As they get there, they have all their gear in front of them. They got their face masks on. They have to slowly get near the car. They have to look inside the car. Well, as they're looking inside the car, one of the bomb squad members yells out, "Secondary."
Secondary, secondary. We have a secondary.
Which means there's a second device inside the car.
Little do police know that Brian Wells' death is only the beginning of their own cat-and-mouse game with a real-life jigsaw. In the movie Saw, 2 men find themselves victim of a serial killer nicknamed Jigsaw, who plays games with his victims and gives them one last chance to survive.
You have to kill somebody or you will be killed. Who wants to make that choice? I mean, would death be any worse?
And back in Erie, Pennsylvania, the police will be on a desperate search to uncover a real-life jigsaw after realizing that bank robber Brian Wells might have been the victim of a mad bomber.
Today live from Erie, Pennsylvania, a bank robbery.
The bomb tech looks into the car and he yells, "Secondary."
Secondary, secondary.
What he sees is the cane that Brian had walked into the bank.
They found the cane that Mr. Wells had been carrying and quickly realized it was not just a cane, it was in fact a homemade shotgun.
And although the cane isn't a bomb like police originally believed, when they search the back seat, they find handwritten instructions that are clues straight from the movie Saw.
I found something.
They find a 9-page letter that is a note, apparently from the people who did put the bomb on Mr. Wells, directing him on what he was supposed to do to rob the bank and to find the keys that were to unlock the bomb that he was wearing around his neck and potentially save his life. The very first instruction on the note was, "Act first, think later, or you will die."
Now, what this uncovered was that Brian Wells was on a scavenger hunt. He was on a scavenger hunt for his life.
Once the bank was robbed, the rest of the instructions detailed where Brian was to go after he robbed the bank. He was to go to the McDonald's sign. There'd be a rock. He'd uncover the rock. There'd be more instructions.
Much like the plot of Saw, this seems to be much more complex than a bank robbery.
What goes on in the mind of the police is, why would anyone rob a bank this way?
To understand who would use the threat of a bomb to force Brian Wells to rob a bank, investigators decide to take a closer look at his life.
The first thing you do as an investigator is you have to set up a victimology. You have to understand who is the victim. Why is this victim part of this crime?
The FBI begins to construct a timeline of what had happened on the day that Mr. Wells had been killed.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
I'm Agent Brown from the FBI. I'd like to speak to the owner. Is Tony here?
Hey, Tony. Cops are here, man. They want to talk to you.
Hi, Tony.
They went to Mamma Mia's Pizza, which was his employer.
We would like to talk with you about Mr. Wells.
Hey, Robert, can you come here for a second, please?
The FBI, they go to Mamma Mia's and they interview his boss, Tony, and a couple of coworkers. One of them is a fellow by the name of Robert Pinetti, who's pretty close to Brian.
You know him quite well.
Hey, Robert, how are you doing? I'm Agent Carter. This is Agent Brown. We're with the FBI. We just wanted to ask you a few questions about Mr. Wells. We're sorry for the loss of your friend. Have you noticed any changes in Mr. Wells' behavior at all over the recent weeks?
Just a shy, typical guy. He kept to himself. I don't see him doing anything like this.
Yeah, I have no idea why anybody would try to do something like this to him.
They learn that Brian was a quiet man who often kept to himself. He's not the type of guy to rob a bank.
Brian Wells was an enigma for many, many reasons. Law-abiding, had the same job for 10 years. The only time he didn't show up for work is when his cat died.
And the day Brian died was like any other.
Brian came in, normal day, normal work shift.
Boss, I got your cash right here.
And at the same time, a call comes in.
Pizzeria, how can I help you? I'm sorry, say again, please. I can't understand you. Brian! Yes, you gotta talk to this guy. He's mumbling. I don't know what he's saying. I'm not sure what he's saying.
Pizzeria. What? I can't understand them either. 2 pepperoni, and you're at 8631 Peach? Are you sure about that? All right, I got it. Thank you, sir. This guy wants 2 large pepperonis at 8631 Peach. That's a dead end.
That call was the call that changed Brian Wells' life. If he hadn't gone on that call, he'd still be alive.
Brian gets to the address. Now, 8631 Peach Street is not a house, it's not a business. It's a gravel road. It's up by the towers, these local transmission towers. When you're in that area, when you turn around to look out, you can't see anything. I mean, you're a good 150 yards off the road.
Based on Brian's statement to police shortly before he died in the explosion, detectives already know what happened next.
According to Brian, when he got to the end of the road to deliver the pizzas, there were 3 men sitting in the area waiting.
Don't shoot! I don't have...
He said he was shot at, so if he tried to run, they probably shot at him as he was trying to run, forced him on the ground.
Is this a bomb?
He was made aware that the device that was put around his neck was a bomb and that he was being ordered to rob a bank with this bomb around his neck.
Here are your instructions. You follow those instructions, in 50 minutes we unlock the bomb. If not, you're a dead man.
It's very similar to the movie Saw. After Jigsaw abducts his victims, he puts them in a life and death situation with the clock ticking, and they desperately have to figure a way out.
But Brian Wells is not able to make it through his quest.
After robbing the bank, Brian Wells was only able to make it to the first place of instruction on the scavenger hunt because shortly thereafter, and not far from McDonald's, he was stopped by police.
The big question is, what would have happened to Brian Wells had he followed the rest of the instructions?
When the FBI get the notes and they examine the notes, what they decide to do is, hey, let's go through Brian's steps that day and where he was supposed to go. So the next set of instructions tells Brian to go down onto the highway, Follow that highway a short bit, there'll be a mile marker sign. And under the mile marker sign will be a Tupperware container wrapped in orange tape. And in that will be more instructions. They go to that scene, they find this container, they look in it, and they find there are actually notes in there that tells them to go to yet another location.
When investigators arrive at the next clue, they find a jar, but it's empty. What was supposed to be in that jar were the keys that were to unlock the bomb that was around Brian Wells' neck. I think when police found the keys were missing, they realized that whoever had come up with this conspiracy to rob this bank had never intended to allow Mr. Wells to live. Police didn't have any leads at this point, and they needed to release some information to the public and hope to gather some leads. And when they did, they called the case Collar Bomber.
I will at least show a picture of the mechanism that was affixed around the neck of the victim entering the bank. What we're impressing upon anyone who might have observed something like this in the past would be extremely important for that person or persons to call us with specific information.
Then, on August 31st, just 3 days after Brian was murdered, another death shocks the citizens of Erie, Pennsylvania.
Robert Pinetti, who's Brian's friend and co-worker at Mamma Mia's Pizzeria, is found dead in his house.
There must be some connection between these two deaths.
As the real-life jigsaw just claimed a second victim.
People in the community were stunned by this entire turn of events and were very worried because this had happened once, and would there be another victim? Would this happen again? And the longer the case went on without any sort of arrests, the more worried people got.
In Saw, the director, James Wan, uses a time-proven plot device called the ticking time bomb. This storytelling technique keeps the audience on the edge of their seats. But now, police are racing against time to find a real-life killer scarier than the movie.
The great thing about the movie Saw is that nothing is as it seems. Jigsaw's motivations and why he does what he does is very complicated, and much is the same for the Erie Collar Bomber.
Now investigators have another body on their hands. Robert Pinetti, Wells's friend and co-worker, is found dead in his home. Is this the work of the Collar Bomber?
Yeah, that's him.
The first thing they thought of is this has to have something to do with the Collar Bomber. Anytime you have two deaths closely related, you have to think that they are linked. And the investigators found this completely bizarre.
So police and the FBI are saying, well, that's strange. There's got to be some connection. What's the connection?
But the medical examiner is having difficulty determining whether the death was self-inflicted or homicide.
The investigators found needles, drug paraphernalia, and a body. But they had to be thinking, is it an overdose? Is it a suicide? Or did somebody make it look like this in order to get away with murder?
A look into Robert Pinetti's past leaves detectives thinking that his death might be completely unrelated to the Collar Bomber. Pinetti was a known drug user who had a long history of drug abuse.
And one would think there was a connection, but it wasn't. Just strange twist of fate. Pure coincidence. Police, although they try, are unable to link that death to the Collar Bomber.
With Pinetti's death officially classified as an accidental overdose, investigators now find themselves in a race against time to figure out their bizarre case.
With the case going nowhere, but with all the information that they were amassing, police and FBI developed a profile of who this Collar Bomber was.
For starters, They look at the t-shirt Brian Wells wore during the bank robbery.
The t-shirt that Brian Wells was wearing over top of the bomb said Guess across the front, as in the brand name Guess, but it could also be seen as a taunt. Guess who's behind this? Guess who's the mastermind of this ploy?
The killer's guessing game is very similar to the movie Saw.
In Saw, a character named Jigsaw is playing a cat and mouse game with people's lives. He seems like a madman who's picking his victims at random, but like the eerie collar bomber, there's a deeper and more sinister motive.
On the hunt for a killer, investigators meticulously reconstruct the collar bomb.
They realized it was a very ingenious device. It wasn't exactly complicated, but there were a lot of false clues and a lot of things that would have led the bomb squad, had they arrived on time, to be delayed in being able to get this off of him. It seemed an awful lot like this entire scheme was some sort of fuel to an ego of some sort of person who fancied himself a criminal mastermind.
As the FBI is piecing together the profile of this unknown puppet master, they get an unforeseen shock, one that will blow the collar bomber case wide open.
Almost a month after Brian Wells' death, police get a 911 phone call from a man who says that he has a body in his freezer.
The man identifies himself as William Rothstein.
Mr. Rothstein?
Yes.
You called 911?
Yes, I did.
About a body?
Yes.
Can you please step out, sir?
Little do police know, this seemingly unrelated call will forever change their investigation.
And Mr. Rothstein called the police to inform them that he had a dead man in his freezer, but that he didn't kill him.
He claims that his ex-girlfriend, Marjorie Deal Armstrong, is to blame. But this new information isn't the only alarming fact about this frozen body.
Rothstein's house was directly beside the location where Brian Wells had delivered the pizzas.
It could all just be a coincidence, or maybe not. The FBI is about to get a new break in their investigation to uncover the collar bomber, but they'd soon find themselves in a race against time and death.
Face it, the truth dies with me.
In the horror classic Saw, the villain, Jigsaw, is an evil mastermind who plans meticulously how to kill his victims.
He's masterminded a game. He wants his victims to choose between death or life. And the whole time they're thinking, why me?
And it now seems Brian Wells has met his demise from a real-life Jigsaw. When a local Erie resident named William Rothstein calls police about a random murder committed by his ex-girlfriend, detectives start to think that the body he reported in the freezer isn't so random after all.
Well, I got a call from Marjorie, and she said that she had a problem and she needed me to help clean it up.
Can you please give us Marjorie's full name?
Marjorie Deal Armstrong.
Okay, please continue.
She told me that she had had a fight with her boyfriend, James Roden, and had shot him in the back with a shotgun.
Rothstein tells police the man in the freezer was Jim Roden, who was the current boyfriend of Marjorie Deal Armstrong.
But why would Marjorie want to kill her boyfriend, Jim Roden? And why did she solicit help from her ex, William Rothstein?
The place was a mess. I mean, blood was everywhere. And she wanted me to clean it up and dispose of the body.
Why would you come forward now to confess all this?
I'll have to admit, she did pay me $70,000.
$70,000. Well, is there anything else you want to add?
Well, I just want everybody to know that I had nothing to do with this Brian Wells case.
Brian Wells, you mean the color bomber?
It seems very strange to police that this man being questioned about something completely different would just offhandedly mention this doesn't have anything to do with the man with the collar bomb.
So why'd you tell us that now? It only draws our suspicion to you that you might be somehow involved with this case as well. Are you involved?
The FBI wants to keep a close eye on Rothstein. He is arrested and charged with abuse of a corpse, and the local news picks up the story.
So anytime you have a big media presence and people just want to know about this case, you can use that to your advantage, and that's what the investigators did.
The news story prompts a witness to come forward with information. The tipster tells police he saw William Rothstein using a public payphone on the same day Brian Wells died. And when police check the phone's records, they learn that a call was in fact placed to Mamma Mia's Pizzeria on the day in question.
Pizzeria, how can I help you?
When they asked William Rothstein, were you on the payphone? He admits, yeah, I used the same payphone that day.
Then a second witness comes forward saying they saw Rothstein at the local dump a few days before his arrest.
Bill Rothstein was seen at the landfill dumping over 1,000 pounds of something into the waste at the landfill.
What this says to investigators is that Rothstein was trying to get rid of something. He was trying to hide evidence.
At this point, investigators believed that Bill Rothstein was definitely in on this case, but they needed some sort of a smoking gun.
Shockingly, that smoking gun comes from an unexpected source.
It turns out they did have one person who was willing to tie Rothstein to Brian Wells. It was Rothstein's ex-girlfriend, Marjorie Deal Armstrong, the same woman who killed James Roden.
It was not my fault. And Bill Rothstein is a filthy liar that's gonna get sued.
But police are still a long way away from connecting the dots from solving the collar bomb case.
When Marjorie Deal Armstrong was taken into custody, she started talking, and talking a lot.
Bill created the bomb.
He built the bomb?
Bill had this big idea to have Brian Wells. He was gonna go rob a bank for us.
She starts saying William Rothstein had something to do with Brian Wells' death.
The story doesn't make much sense.
They realized they had a huge problem because this woman was completely mentally unstable. And they say, she's given us great information. The only problem is we can't use any of this. It would never make it into the court of law. They start thinking, if we can't use Marjorie Deal Armstrong's testimony, and there's not many other witnesses coming forward, maybe the best thing we can do is put a lot of pressure on William Rothstein. The only problem is the FBI is about to get information that they didn't see coming.
We need to talk. We know you're involved.
Involved? Where did you hear this from?
Your ex-girlfriend, Marjorie, told us everything.
Marjorie? Marjorie's crazy. Who's gonna believe her?
Turns out, William Rothstein has an ace up his sleeve.
I've got cancer. It's terminal. I'm gonna be dead in a month.
They realized that Bill Rothstein had cancer and wasn't going to be alive for very much longer.
Face it, the truth dies with me.
It's eerily similar to the movie Saw.
In the movie Saw, the mastermind Jigsaw was diagnosed with terminal cancer and knows he's not going to live. He's irritated by the fact that most people don't really appreciate the life that they are living. And he thinks if they don't appreciate life, they don't deserve to live.
For now, Bill Rothstein is proving to be a bigger villain than Jigsaw from the movie.
He's dying. So This puts a lot of pressure on the investigators. They've got to get Rothstein to admit that he killed Brian Wells before Rothstein dies.
Did you kill Brian Wells?
They interviewed him as he was basically on his deathbed, and still he refused to admit any involvement in the case.
On July 30th, 2004, William Rothstein dies of cancer.
So as Rothstein died, so did the case against him.
But not all of Rothstein's secrets died with him.
Suddenly, a new witness comes forward, a guy by the name of Kenneth Barnes.
And Kenneth Barnes has a whopper of a story for police.
He tells them that it's not William Rothstein who's the mastermind behind a collar bomber.
Perhaps Marjorie Deal Armstrong isn't as incompetent as she seems. In the movie Saw, no one knows what is going to happen until the very end. And like the film, the eerie collar bomb case is about to get its twist ending after prime suspect William Rothstein dies of cancer before the case is officially solved.
With Rothstein's death, the only person that can link Rothstein to Brian Wells is Marjorie. And Marjorie is mentally incompetent.
Luckily for police, Marjorie is sitting in prison for putting her boyfriend, James Roden, on ice. But police still can't figure out how James Roden's death connects to the collar bomb case. And soon, detectives will be asking themselves another question. Who is the real mastermind behind the bizarre murder?
When Marjorie goes to prison, she claims to have more information about the collar bomb case, and she wants a deal in exchange for the information.
Can you get me out of here and find me another place?
Yeah, sure. If you cooperate with us, we'll see what we can do.
And they agree. And she talks more and more about Rothstein.
Even though Marjorie Deal Armstrong was mentally unstable, she was giving the investigators good information.
I gave Bill, for the bomb, the timer.
Marjorie told investigators the brand of the timers was Sunbeam. She described them to a T. The information had not been released to the public, so it was something that only someone who was involved would possibly know.
But then the FBI gets sideswiped by information they didn't see coming.
And suddenly, a new witness comes forward, a guy by the name of Kenneth Barnes. It turns out that Kenneth Barnes is currently sitting in prison. He's in jail for drug charges. Well, Kenneth Barnes wants to get out of prison.
Barnes tells the investigators that it was not Bill Rothstein who was the evil mastermind, but in fact was Marjorie Deal Armstrong.
He tells them, I'm her fishing buddy. I've known her for years. Basically, he says, Marjorie Deal Armstrong asked Kenneth Barnes if he would help her murder her father.
Marjorie tells Ken that her father is worth a fortune.
Marjorie was the last living heir and believed that should her father die, she would be the one to inherit his wealth.
Would you do it?
Do what? So she asks Kenneth Barnes, would you please murder my father? And he says, I'll do it for $250,000. But he said he was joking. However, Marjorie Deal Armstrong said, okay.
Where are you gonna get that kind of cash? I know you ain't got it.
And that's when she came up with the plot to rob the bank, to get the money to pay for Kenneth Barnes to kill her father.
She was the person who came up with the plan, at least according to Ken Barnes, and she enlisted the help of several other people. Ken Barnes to obviously kill her father, and Bill Rothstein to build the bomb.
But why did the man in the freezer, Marjorie's current boyfriend, James Roden, have to die?
She also asked James Roden to be in on the plot. James Roden said, yes, I'll be on the plot. However, when James Roden realized how much money she was probably going to inherit from her father, he kind of threatened her. He said, I will help you with this, but I want more of a cut, or I'm going to go to the police.
And that was a risk that Marjorie wasn't willing to take, and she killed him.
It seems as if investigators have learned all the details about the case, except for one. Why did D.L. Armstrong and company decide to target Brian Wells to be the bank robber?
Well, that's when Kenneth Barnes drops another bombshell on them. Brian Wells was in on the plot all along.
But why was Brian Wells a conspirator instead of a victim?
So Brian Wells had a girlfriend. She also was a prostitute and addicted to crack. And her crack dealer was Kenneth Barnes. And as her addiction grew, she needed money. Her crack dealer, Kenny Barnes, went to Brian Wells and said, I'm gonna rob a bank. Why don't you come in on this with me? And together, we'll get so much money that you'll be able to support your girlfriend's crack addiction. When Brian Wells agreed to participate, he had no idea of what this would involve or that it would cost him his life.
Brian Wells had no clue that Kenneth Barnes's proposal was all part of an elaborate murder scheme orchestrated by William Rothstein and Marjorie D.L. Armstrong.
When he showed up with the pizzas to deliver them that day, he was told at that time that the bomb was not, in fact, a fake, and he quickly said, I want out.
But that wasn't part of the plan.
They forced the bomb on his neck, they turned on the timer, and Rothstein told him, you have 50 minutes.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Brian Wells had no idea that the kitchen timer could have been easily just manipulated to give him more time.
On November 1st, 2010, Marjorie D.L. Armstrong is convicted and is sentenced to 30 years for her involvement in the plot.
Did you make the bomb?
No. Barnes's 45-year sentence for the bomb plot is reduced to 20 years because he cooperated with authorities. William Rothstein and Brian Wells are also posthumously named as co-conspirators. There is just one question that continues to plague detectives. Who was the real mastermind behind the collar bomb?
One of the things that investigators are still arguing about is whether Rothstein was the mastermind or if he was just another pawn of Marjorie. I think Bill Rothstein decided to commit this crime because he knew that he had cancer and he knew that his time was ending, and he wanted the world to be forever questioning, was he the one behind it?
When you examine this case, it all comes back to poor Brian Wells. Poor, alone Brian Wells, who didn't have a clue that he was having his life put on the line for really this egomaniac who could have cared less about him. And it's sad, because he's the one who died. He's the one that was murdered. He's the one who only wanted to get happiness with his girlfriend. And yet these crazy egotists, Rothstein, Marjorie, it's really all just a game that you're playing with human life. Sad, and ultimately, almost unbelievable.
Just like the unforgettable movie Saw, the collar bomb case will be remembered for a long time to come.
The great thing about the movie Saw is that nothing is as it seems. Jigsaw's motivations and why he does what he does is very complicated, and much is the same for the Erie collar bomber. Even today, people wonder why go through all that trouble just to commit a bank robbery. But we think that's what the Erie collar bomber wanted. He wanted to leave a legacy. He didn't want to be forgotten.